By Francois Rossouw. He is CEO of Southern Africa Agricultural Initiative. Francois, a very good morning to you, and thank you for making time for us on Africa Rise and Shine.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
As we say, the country's been battling with foot and mouth disease control for years now. I think by this time of the year, we know it's going to happen. There will be an outbreak. So what are we missing then in terms of prevention to alleviate the negative impacts of foot and mouth disease?
Yeah, I think this is something very important to discuss, as there are several factors that should be looked at. The first one is we have a weakness in biosecurity controls, and it's getting worse each and every year. We did not see these types of outbreaks of foot and mouth disease, avian influenza, and what we also saw in the pork industry in years prior to 2000 and before that. The second one is ineffective implementation of regulations. South Africa really has good regulations and measures in place when it comes to these type of outbreaks, but the problem is that these type of regulations need to be policed and need to be enforced. Then we have a challenge with the DMAs, or the disaster disease management areas, about policing the movement of animals. This is not just a Department of Agriculture problem. Yes, they have to manage it, and they have to make sure that they are in control of the project. But we also do need the police. We do need the army to assist with getting blockades on the road to ensure that sick animals do not leave the DMAs. Then, because of these DMAs, we've got farmer desperation. A farmer who's now not able to move his cattle because of an FMD DMA area cannot get an income. So we are creating criminals out of these farmers who need to create an income, and they are desperately trying to move their cattle from a disease-ridden area into a non-disease-ridden area to slaughter that animals. And we urgently need to find them a solution within their area to solve this problem. Have a lack. Sorry.
Yeah,
yes,
go on. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, we've still got a lot of them, and mainly the biggest one of them being the fact that we are not producing our own vaccines anymore. This is it's really such an embarrassment that we have an institution like Onderstepoort Biological Products, who was the best in Africa, and now we are actually buying all our vaccines from Botswana.
Can we trace back in terms of how this foot and mouth disease made its way into this Heidelberg Gauteng farm? Usually, or in previous years and cases, farmers that were closer to the Kruger National Park were the ones to be seen as high risk. It's now in Gauteng.
Yeah, you see, and that's the major concern. If it broke out in a facility like Heidelberg, who has very strict biosecurity controls, but we see prior to that, the disease was in KwaZulu-Natal, where it's still rampant. There's still, out of the 288 cases that were reported after 2021, 154 of them came out of KwaZulu-Natal. Then we saw the outbreak in the Eastern Cape, where this type of disease is much worse on dairy cattle than it is on normal cattle. So it's already spreading throughout the country, but we are not able to determine exactly where it came from. But you are correct. The red zone is in Limpopo, because that's where it originated, because it comes originally from buffalo in the Kruger National Park.
How do we treat foot and mouth disease? In the cases, some cases we know it's fatal.
Yeah, look, out of the 4,500 cattle that were infected at Heidelberg, there was not one mortality. So the problem is just, because of the sores on the feet and on the mouth, the cattle just don't eat as much, so the conditioning is very poor. But again, it's safe for people, and we do have vaccinations that they will now be purchasing from Botswana. But again, because this is not local strains that we are buying or producing ourselves, the protection will be for 3 months, instead of where, if we produced it successfully in South Africa, it would have been 6 to 12 months.
So it was in a feedlot that it spread, and feedlots are seen as very crucial when it comes to animal nutrition, especially because they are for increased weight gain, especially with the cattle. That's going to be more money if the cattle weighs more and it's got more weight. So, and yes. Also a feedlot is seen as a more controlled environment in terms of how you feed your animals. Does this now outbreak point to maybe a fact that the feedlots aren't as controlled as we thought and we previously believed them to be? And what biosecurity measures do farmers need to now implement?
Yeah, so first of all, I think, there are three crucial places. The spread of foot and mouth disease is when cattle travel, because it's a highly communicable disease, and it's based on touch, and it can even be with infected hay. So when a farmer takes his cattle to a feedlot or to an abattoir or to an auction, that is the crucial points of contact. And that is why we need to have two things in place. Good biosecurity controls. You need to wash off all of the dirt and all of the spores of the disease when you leave your farm, and not necessarily when you enter a farm. That is also good, but then you're washing it down on where the farm is. When you leave the farm, you need to wash down your tires, you need to wash down the back of your bakkie or your trailer or whatever you're using to transport it with. And then the second thing we urgently need in South Africa is we need a traceability system, a digital traceability system that also accounts for the documentation, the health declarations that are accompanying these cattle. And then the most importantly, the third one, which I've already mentioned, is we need blockades enforced by police or the military. That is the only thing that will stop this thing immediately.
Once it has a spread or there's an outbreak, how long does it typically take to remove and deal with? Granted that, of course, some stock will be lost, but when one can expect to resume production usually takes how long?
Yeah, well, once they've vaccinated, I think first they need to quarantine and make sure that the outbreak doesn't move any further from that facility or the DMA in KwaZulu-Natal or any other of the areas which they believe to be infected. Once they've quarantined that and they've vaccinated, then you are able to only slaughter after 90 days. So that will be the process. But at the current moment, there was an operations center put up yesterday by industry bodies, which will now roll out a 3-month action plan to communicate to industry and to farmers on what needs to be done to contain this.
Should neighboring countries to South Africa be concerned, the likes of Lesotho, Swaziland, Botswana, as well, Namibia, Zimbabwe?
Yeah, well, I think they've already halted all imports of cattle and meat in any case. Our neighbors in Namibia and Botswana have some of the best biosecurity controls that there is. And that's why they are known as some of the best cattle farmers in the world, because they are able to export to countries like the United States and Europe, because they have a foot and mouth disease free status, because they just have better biosecurity controls than us.
Let's leave it there for now. Francois, we appreciate your time and have a good Tuesday.
Thank you, you too.
That's Francois Rossouw, CEO of Southern Africa Agricultural Initiative, talking to us about foot and mouth disease. Stay with us as we continue with our coverage of news in and around our continent.
Stella Longwe, Pamalonje.